welcome back to our special series here on the NHIC podcast, sponsored by our partners at DGCOS, HICS and HIES. I'm Anna Scothern, and today we're diving into the nuts and bolts of day-to-day operations for tradespeople, sole traders and small businesses in the home improvement sector. With us today are two experts in the field, Thom Emerson, Managing Director at Ideal Window Solutions, and Faisal Hussain, Chief Executive of DGCOS, HICS and HIES, our sponsors for today. So I'd like to firstly introduce you to both of our speakers. And firstly, we'll come to you, Thom. Hello.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And are you looking forward to giving us all of your wisdom today?
I'm hoping there's enough of it.
I'm sure there will be. And welcome, Faisal.
Thanks, Anne, for having me. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Thom, because he is an installation business and we all want to hear what he does and how we can assist installers.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we dive into the meat of the episode, you are the Chief Executive of our sponsor company, DGCOS, HICS and HIES. And it would be really great if you told listeners why you felt it important to create this series of podcasts and sponsor this work.
Yeah, sure. I suppose this goes back to when I first entered the home improvement sector in 2010. And over the last 14 years, I've been speaking to installers on a regular basis, and certain themes are coming up all the time about how, they either set up a new business or they've come across various problems within a business. Sometimes they didn't know how to deal with an issue. Sometimes, unfortunately, they would bury their head in the sand and hope the issue went away. And really, what we want to do is to try and give installers some insight into how they can potentially do things differently. And hopefully these series of podcasts will provide a couple of nuggets of information for an installer listening in who will potentially say, do you know what? I've never tried that before. Let's try that. So really, in reality, we're hoping to make a difference across any home improvement company.
Well, that's fantastic. And it comes off of the back of a successful podcast that you did with us last year around mental health awareness in home improvement and construction.
Yeah, and I think they're both linked as well together, because running, today we're talking about operational side of things. If your operational side of your business is running efficiently, then it will have a positive impact on your well-being as well at the same time, because of the stress factor and anxiety, and things are working correctly for you. So it's very much hand in hand. And especially for business owners like Thom, if they know that there's some help or assistance they can have from a third party as well at the same time, it just alleviates that burden for them as well. So hopefully by doing these podcast series, we can improve people's health and well-being at the same time.
Yeah, and it's really great to do it via podcast, I think, because it means people can listen to it when they're out on the road. They can have it on in the background while they're perhaps doing some of their admin work. So it allows us to reach audiences in a new way. I think it's a nice channel for us to connect with people on. Thom, could you just tell us a little bit about your company and about your background in the sector?
Yeah, Ideal Window Solutions is effectively an installation specialist. We don't manufacture anything. We made that decision, some decades ago, that what we were good at was managing and operating people rather than making things, and building good relationships with suppliers. And there's a sort of clue in the name, Anna, that what we want to do is offer solutions. And if you only make one product, that can be quite difficult to do. So our business operates in two principal areas: new build development. So we supply windows and doors to developers that are building new houses. And we have a retail division. So we're selling windows and doors and conservatories to your average man in the street who just wants to improve the home. So basically, I've been in the industry. It sounds terrible when I say since 1977, but unfortunately, that's how long it's been. I started off in the glass industry and worked my way through manufacturing and sales and working in other businesses before joining my current partner about 15 years ago.
Well, you've got a wealth of experience, and that's what's important. And hopefully we're going to sort of unlock and unpick some of that today. Many installers and many professionals in the home improvement sector, or specifically in your world in the glazing sector, come into this world as a tradesperson. Often they might be on the tools, and they can then end up suddenly finding themselves with having to do the day-to-day operations of a business, and think about things like cash flow and marketing, and some people can really struggle with those aspects of the business because might have been trained in, well, they will have been trained in their trade, if you like, but nobody sort of seems to do the business side of things. So what would be your take on this?
It's very true, because a lot of people, particularly in our sector, but in other home improvement sectors, arrive in ownership as a specialist. They are predominantly in our industry, they tend to be salespeople, somebody that's been really good at sales, worked in another organisation, feel like they have produced all the revenue for that business and think, I can do that myself. And actually they know quite a lot about things like lead acquisition and a little bit about marketing, and they're quite comfortable talking to customers. So they set up a business and then suddenly realise actually you've got to manage people, you've got to interact with HMRC, you've got to be able to run operations, you've got to buy from suppliers and pay your bills on time. And all of a sudden, they've got to be an expert in 7 or 8 specialisms, and hardly spend any time in their own specialism, which was sales when they started the business up.
Absolutely. And it's often that people can wait too long to realise that they might need some help in some of these areas.
Yeah, I think, again, it's very typical of owner-managed businesses that the person in that chair believes that everybody else in the business is looking to them for answers, and they've got to be able to provide all the answers. And if they don't have the confidence to, ask other people or try and find a resource that will support them, then that's really where the struggle is. And that's, as Faisal was pointing out, where lots of people get into mental health difficulties, because if they're spinning all the plates and have not learned to ask for help.
Absolutely. And delegation is often the last thing that anybody wants to do, because they can sometimes feel as though they're the boss, they're the name on the name above the door. And but it's recognizing that it's about building a team and having the right support. And Faisal, how can early engagement with schemes like yours help people?
I think it's really important what Thom has said, which is you go from potentially being, from a sales background or even from an operational background to I'm going to try and run my own business. And what you don't realize is you might have a speciality in the sales and marketing side, but actually the operational side is equally as important. And people generally don't realize that. And what happens is, and we've had it a number of times, and recently a good friend of mine, he set up a business in home improvements, and he went through the first 3-4 months of struggles of well, I was very technical, so now I'm having to try and run a business here, and what is a cash flow and what does that look like? And only yesterday I was actually speaking to a colleague of mine about cash flow and about how it works, and we take things like that into granted, in terms of you think that people should know this, but why would you know it? Because you've never been involved in that aspect before. And this is where I think our schemes come into it where we can actually provide installers with that support of template cash flow, template profit and loss accounts, even recommend in terms of, set up an accounts with QuickBooks, for example, or Xero, for example, or we have some accountants, we have HR professionals if you're looking to employ staff as well, because your contracts are important for your staff as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, and there's all these different aspects that as a owner of a business, you generally don't think of them because it's not your specialty, but they equally are important. And what we can do is we can help guide our members through that process to say, have you actually considered contracts for your staff? Have you considered the holidays? Have you considered sick pay? That's just one element that we're looking at from a contractual HR point of view. And cash flows, P&Ls, who are you going to go for your marketing leads? How are you going to generate your leads? What does your website look like? Does your website actually perform in accordance with what Google should be doing? So just that alone, that's only not even 5% of what I'm talking about would confuse anyone. And I suppose what we're there to help with is to give that assistance and that hopefully that roadmap to say, let's have this checklist of things that you need to do, and we will handhold you through that process.
And that's so powerful. Oh, sorry, Thom. No, please carry on.
What's really important as well, Faisal, is that when you were describing some fairly basic requirements of HR, whether it's the contract or how you dealt with people, it's gotten even tougher because we're now in a situation where lots more people are recognising that members of their staff might be neurodivergent, and they might have women in their teams that are getting older, and having to understand how you're going to put in reasonable adjustments for people, and how difficult dealing with people with all different requirements. If you haven't got that expertise and you haven't got a resource to go and ask for that help, it's so easy to make mistakes and find yourself in trouble with individual people in your team or with the authorities, just because you haven't understood that you need help to actually navigate your way around some of those relationships.
Absolutely. And I think as well, it's difficult when it's not your specialism. It's difficult to know the right questions to ask. So even when you're seeking an accountant, so you're just starting out and you're seeking a professional accountant, moving from doing your own books to having some support, how do you choose? It's difficult to have a conversation with an accountant to, and sort of say, well, I'll meet with 2 or 3 and see what they think. But if you don't know, if you've not got your own sort of ideas of the types of questions you should be asking and the things that are important to you and the nuances of running a glazing install business or a general home improvement business, it's vastly different to running a traditional retail business or an online shopping business. So you do need to have some help and some guidance on that. And it's the same, as you both have talked about HR contracts, part-time workers, contractors, remote working, making sure that, you suddenly get into equality, diversity and inclusivity policies. And is that included? What's the GDPR rules? You do need some support on that. And it's just fantastic that DGCOS, HICS and HIES provide that guidance to their members. That's a real benefit right there.
And I think people understanding that you could ring an organisation like DGCOS that's there to support you, and even if they can't give the answer immediately, they've got the resource to work with you and support you. Because one of the things I've often found with meeting other owner-managed businesses who are trying to navigate their way around all these different specialties is vocabulary. We'll all talk about things. You just said about meeting an accountant. If you're spending money in your new business on marketing and your accountant says to you, what's the ROI? For people that understand what that means, that's fairly simple. You can talk about what you've spent and you can talk about what sort of return you've had. But if you haven't had that training, even the vocabulary, to understand what return on investment means is a complete minefield for some of these people. And it's almost, you could almost produce a glossary of terms in each of these specialties so that you could support people just understanding the basics, because some people are quite shy to put their hand up and say, I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, and I think it is quite good to say I don't understand, but what you've got to do as an owner manager is know how to find the right person who does understand, so that you can weave a solid tapestry of a business with those different specialisms in it, rather than sticking your head in the sand and then having damage control problems further down the line, which is often the challenges that we can face.
Well, one of the things that happens for people that set up a business is they probably are quite good at recognizing their strengths. So if you take it as a salesperson starting a business, they made good conversions, they knew how to sell, they made decent money. So they understand that they have that strength. They're a good communicator, possibly. They know how to win orders. But to become a mature business owner, you've got to understand what your weaknesses are. Those are the bits that you need to manage so that you can be successful and protect your balance sheet.
Definitely. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's okay not to know everything, that you don't have to know the answers to every question and to know everything that is happening in your business. And there is, Thom, often a pressure or a perceived pressure to know it all. What would you say to someone that is feeling overwhelmed and feeling that pressure?
I mean, it's a really good point, Anna, because people do struggle when they perceive themselves as being the person in charge and everybody's looking to them, when they realise they're maybe not the cleverest person in the room. But I think it's a huge strength. It shows maturity in a business, that you understand you don't have to be the cleverest person in the room. Your role, and I often use this analogy, a conductor of an orchestra doesn't have to play all of the instruments. It's his job to get a tune out of them. And if you can put yourself in a position of understanding that if you put people in your team that are better than you, all you can do is be more successful more quickly. You don't have to worry about whether they know more than you. That's not the point. The point is you should employ them if they know more than you, and then you should use that to your advantage.
For sure, absolutely. And Faisal, your schemes are there to help sort of fill some of those gaps with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always said this for a very long time. I've got a saying which is, I know that I don't know, therefore I know. And essentially it's all about, you shouldn't think to yourself that you should know everything. Each owner of a business, regardless of whether you're in home improvements or not, you will always be asked questions on a daily basis, whether it's from your customers, your staff, your suppliers, and you sometimes feel under pressure to have the answers there and then. And like I always say to my team, which is, don't be afraid to say, I'll take that with me and I'll come back to you, because even when we have, we've got over 1,000 installers who are with us across our consumer protection schemes, and every day an installer will call up and ask us a question that we've never been asked before. And I always say to the team, the worst thing you can do is try and bluff the answer.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do is to say, I don't know, but give me half an hour and I will call you back and I will try and get you the answer. And that's, I think, our USP, is because we potentially speak to, hundreds of installers on a regular basis, we might come across a situation that we've come across before, and we might be able to say to you, actually, we've come across this situation before, here are things that can help you. Or we'll say, never come across that before, give me half an hour, let me go and investigate, and I'll come back to you with the answer. And that's so important, because when I entered the glazing industry in 2010, I asked an installer, I said, what do you want from us? And his response was, well, when I call you, I just hope you pick up the phone. And I started laughing. I thought he was actually joking. And he said, I'm not joking. He said, we ring other associations and they don't answer the phone. And he said, so if you can answer the phone, that'd be great. And I said, don't worry, we'll answer the phone.
Yeah. Oh dear, that's heartbreaking, isn't it? That the that's the level of help that was there before you know, as you say, it was a while ago. But Thom, can you I'd like to talk a little bit about the importance and I guess the power in having processes for your business, because I think once you've established your process, it then becomes easier to share and to delegate. But what do you think is the importance of having those solid processes in place for your business?
Yeah, and in my opinion, Anna, it's almost impossible to run a successful business without good operational processes. One of the problems that you have in any business is, and particularly if you own it and you started it and you have a clear vision, how do you describe that to other people? How do you take something that may have worked for you on an ad hoc basis and turn it into a process that other people can follow? They can follow it, on a regular basis, get the same result every time they do it, and it be measurable. So, for example, in our business, in Idle Window Solutions, we have an internal system that we've developed over probably 23, 24 years that literally has an influence on everything we do, from initial inquiry to final account. It records all the conversations people have had, it records all of the adds to a contract, all the omits from a contract. When should we be on site? Should we be on, how much material should we have of this on site? It literally is that simple. It would be impossible for us to run this business successfully without the processes we've put in place, because it enables us to understand how much we're paying for product, how much we're charging for product. Are we making the margin that we wanted to make at the beginning? So we have a set of operational procedures where literally I do a P&L check on every contract we complete. So it doesn't matter at the front end if you think you're going to make money. If you haven't controlled the process, if you haven't had the right amount of fitting, if you haven't paid the right amount for the product, and you haven't checked all those things, then you can be a very, very busy person and make very little money. And that is going to make you more miserable and affect your mental health quicker than anything.
Absolutely. And it's difficult, as you say, to develop these processes if you don't allocate some time to it. So if you don't recognize that it's important to understand how your business is run and then stick to those processes. And as you said, it takes years to do this. It's not something that you just sit down on a Friday afternoon and that's it forever. These things do develop over the time. And it's really important to really sort of add efficiencies and customer satisfaction. And is that something you see, Faisal, with your members?
I think, the word process, it can be a very dirty word as well at the same time. And it can actually put the fear into you as well when somebody says process. And I remember the first time when I came across processes and procedures, somebody handed me a 50-page document, and that scared me because I said, I can't do that. And I was working in marketing at the time, but actually your process is all about your own business. And just because another business does it a certain way, it doesn't mean you have to replicate that. It's all about what's right for your business. So a simple process can start off with just writing some bullet points down on a piece of paper saying, these are the things and these are the elements that I do to actually sign a customer up. And then these are the bullet points that I do for when I need to process a customer from one aspect to another aspect, or to order some materials. it doesn't need to be long-winded, and it doesn't need to be exhaustive, because you start off really small with your bullet points, and just jotting them down as notes, and then you can develop them over time. It takes a long time to develop them, but actually what you should look at is a process actually helps you become more efficient and more streamlined in the long term. Because if you want to grow your business, you want to have more staff involved, then they need to understand how you do things. And also, you might actually, when you write things down on a piece of paper, you might actually come across a situation where you say, why am I actually doing that step in that 10 steps? Do I actually need to do that? What's the better way of doing it? Can I get rid of it? And sometimes you find efficiencies just by doing that. Sometimes you find efficiencies just by thinking about doing it.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to be doing, is just taking them small steps to look at what do we need to do to actually drive excellence within the business. And
it's something that
ultimately, it gives you more time.
Sorry, Faisal, it's something that we try and focus on, working smarter, not harder. And that idea of looking at the process and understanding, how do you get from the beginning of the process to the end of the process? It has to be simple, and it has to be repeatable, and otherwise you can't get a consistent result. And one of the things that we do as a matter of course, if we have a new staff member, is we allow them to be the order. Doesn't matter what they've come in to do. We've started a new financial controller, as it happens, this week, because our existing financial controller was retiring. So he's a qualified accountant. He understands what he needs to do in terms of his job, but he's never worked in our business before. And it's not just about counting things. It has to be about, how did they arrive here? So to take him through the process, how do we actually get a lead? You know, what do we do for lead inquiry? How do we convert them? What happens when we go and do the survey? You know, every part of the process before it ends up being invoiced is crucial. And if you do all those things well and consistently, then you'll do what we all want to do as a business owner, and that is maintain, you know, a cost-profit ratio, where once you've done all the work to deliver what you've promised the customer, what you're left with is yours, and it's fairly thick, and it means that your business is stable and solvent, and that really, for all business owners, is what they're striving for.
Absolutely. And what would you have, Thom, as some top tips for listeners for setting up these processes?
I think one of the things that's really important to me whenever I'm asked to do anything, because I think I have to admit to being generally lazy, so I need to know why I'm doing it and what's going to be the outcome of doing it, because I hate just doing things for the sake of them. So I think you need to look at a process, and we talk about this a lot. You know, people are on a journey, or I've just described how somebody in here would see an order go through our system. That's a journey. But what's really important with the process is, don't just understand the journey. What's the destination? What do you achieve? If the process doesn't achieve anything, then, as Faisal was just explaining, they can just look complicated. It just looks like a big document full of procedure that you have to follow, and people, you know, get nervous with lots of rules and lots of things to remember. But within businesses of any size, and this is repeatable in smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, and large businesses, is you have a process that will deliver to you, something in return. Now, that can be as simply as buying well. It can be, if you take, for example, just-in-time management. If you're a window installer and your cash flow is crucial to you, you want to buy well, that's a given. But you don't want to buy that material too early, and you don't want to stock it too early before you can fit it and get paid for it. Then, having got paid for it, have a customer. understanding just-in-time management, you need a process for that. So, for example, if we have a lead time currently of 10 weeks, we will be saying to our customers, the lead time from the moment the order is clean is 10 weeks. I know I've got to get it surveyed, and I'm going to allow 2 weeks for that. And I know how long it's going to take to manufacture, and I know how long it's going to take to fit. So basically, we're then in a situation where, looking at the process, you can schedule the installation based on when you're going to survey it and when it comes back, how long your manufacturer is going to take to produce it, how quickly it's going to take you to fit it, and you can work back from that. And for either you or Faisal, who've never understood anything about this business before, I could bring you in, show you how that process works, and it would just be logical. So I suppose that's my biggest tip. Know why you're doing it, plan it to be simple and logical, and then it will be consistent and repeatable.
And also, once you've got that process mapped, you're not having to juggle it all in your head. You're not having to think, I've got to remember to do this, and when do I need to place that order, and how, because it's all there in your process, and you can sleep better and you can get through your day without having a chaotic brain. Hopefully.
And this will have happened to all of us. You ring a business or a company you're working with or trying to work with or buy something from, who say they can't give you the answer you want because so and so isn't coming in today, or they're sick, or they've gone home early. You know, your business can't survive based on all the knowledge sitting in someone's head, because too many things can happen. The system we have in the background of everything we do, where people add notes to it, you could literally navigate your way around that system and know exactly the conversations that have been had, when the products were ordered, who's done what, when they did it, and who needs to do something next. And that is, to my mind, the only way operational systems can work.
Mm. And Faisal, what would you say about the customer journey in all of that? Because that's a journey certainly marketeers often talk about, the customer journey. How would you suggest that businesses look to map that process out?
I think you look at the you segment the customer journey into blocks, and you look at each block, and then you look at, well, what are the items within it. And I think Thom mentioned it a few times, which was, trying to coordinate the suppliers, trying to look at it, well, how long is the lead time to get the products in, when do I need to survey? And if you actually write that down in a customer journey, just a diagram if you like, then you can look at and go, right, well, am I actually spending too much time on one element? Or am I, for example, surveying a property twice instead of once? What can I do? What can I change? And sometimes what can happen is that you go and survey a property, and then the customer calls you and says, actually, I've decided that I want an extra window fitting. And then you've got to compensate for that, because you've got to go back out, survey, and come back, do a variation of contract. So it's all about looking at how the customer journey works, but also how you work alongside the customer journey. Are you being a busy fool at times in a certain area, or can you actually look at it and go streamline it? Because part of what we try and encourage our members as well is, write down your pain points, of just generally speaking, write down your pain points and speak to us about your pain points. And hopefully we can assist and help and point you in the direction to help reduce them pain points.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. Thank you very much. And Thom, I want to move on now to practical advice for tradespeople. So some real sort of good nuggets that listeners can take away. And if we're thinking about strategy in the first instance, so how should businesses approach job selection or deposit management?
It's interesting, really, because I think what's vital, once you've got operational processes that support your business, you as a business owner need to understand exactly what your value proposition is. I was explaining at the beginning that we operate in two distinct markets, and they are so different to each other. What's required contractually in our relationship with a major house builder who may be, putting 500 houses up on a site, and what's required by Mr. and Mrs. Jones who are investing in just new windows in a house they've bought, are so different in some aspects, and our value proposition for those two markets basically is the same, because it's all about windows and doors being fitted properly, being guaranteed, and working to do the job they were sold to do. But understanding what you can do and what you can't do, because people get very carried away, and new build's a good example of that. You can look at a project for £1 million, and that £1 million project looks fabulous as an order. But actually, the only bit that's interesting to me about that £1 million contract is the retained profit. And if you pick jobs because they just feel big or they feel exciting, but you haven't got the expertise to fit them, you haven't got the resource to fit them, you can't afford to fund them, all of those are going to put pressure on your business, or on your balance sheet, on your cash flow. And I think you have to take ego out of it, you have to take vanity out of it, you have to understand what you're good at and be prepared just to stick at what you're good at.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, it's about having that understanding of what aligns with your business, and part of that is about understanding the way that you and your business likes to work and the types of clients that meet that need, because not all installers are created equal, and not all clients are created equal as well. And if you're a high turnover, quick in, quick out type of business, you might not want to work with a certain type of client that like you to spend a bit more time with them or need a bit more hand holding. They might be slightly more profitable, but they might not meet your sort of requirements for business. So it's about having that understanding of yourself and what type of customer you're looking for as well, because then that leads into once you understand those things, you can then think, well, actually, how am I going to find my best type of customer and lots of my best type of customer, because they're the types that I want to work with.
I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast will have lived this. You spend your money generating leads. They're expensive, they're hard to acquire, and then when you get them, you don't want to squander them. But we're in a situation where those leads come into the business, they go out to salespeople, and then often the only time I'm then going to interact with those is when they've become an order, unless there's an issue in exactly what you were driving at. Is it a job we want to do? Can we do it? Have we had the expertise to do it? Does the client want us to do something that is not normally in our lane? And we have very strict internal rules about those sort of things. And your salespeople will always hate you saying no. But the truth of the matter is, whatever we take on, and I'm sure Faisal will be pleased to hear this bit, we've got a guarantee for 10 years. And I've got to have the confidence that we've guaranteed it, that it's going to work, that we understood how to do it, that we've done it properly, and I can walk away from it. And if there is any issue, when the client rings and talks to Faisal's team, we can demonstrate we exactly knew what we were doing. I can demonstrate how we did it, and we've got a plausible value proposition that hangs together, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say as regards deposit? Because I know some people, and it's going to be something that even clients, that the homeowners don't fully understand. Are they meant to pay? Is it standard practice to pay a certain amount of deposit up front? Do deposits happen staged process throughout the contractual process? What would you recommend?
Well, it's an interesting point, because I've never understood companies, and I've known a few that don't take a deposit and somehow believe that's a motivation to people to buy from them, because look how confident we are. We don't even ask you for any money. If I go back in my memory of the people that I knew that have tried that process and are now not trading, I think it will highlight how I feel about it. I think what customers need to know is that they're dealing with a solvent business that understands what it's doing. It's got to pay its staff, it's got to pay its taxes, it's got to pay its suppliers, and we need a commitment. So if we are going to commit to supply product for your house and guarantee it for the next 10 years, to show your commitment to us, then taking a deposit, I think, is exactly what people should expect to do. It secures your place in the order book. To be in a position where you could literally risk, surveying a property, ordering product, and having taken no deposit and have no financial security in that relationship, face somebody cancelling you or having buyer's remorse or something happening. I just can't understand why anybody would take the risk.
No, I agree. And Faisal, what about collaboration across the supply chain?
Collaboration is, we take it for a given sometimes that when you're working with your suppliers or your subcontractors, that you collaborate in a way which works really well. But what you've got to understand is that if you are working with a supplier and a subcontractor, that's three businesses that are interacting with each other, potentially about one customer. And they've got their own pressures, they've got their own jobs, and especially, for example, with subcontractors, you can order the products, you can get the products in, you can actually have the installation date ready, but the subcontractor might have overrun on a previous job, and now he's saying, I'm sorry, but I can't get to that job on that date because the subcontractor, he allocates 1 day for a set of windows and doors, for example, and actually this installation now has taken 2 days. So I'm really sorry, but the second day I allocated to you, now I'm going to have to push you back now. So all of that then pushes back. And I think what's really interesting is I've had it myself with some recent home improvements where an installer has thought it's going to take me 2 days to do this job. It's taken him 2.5 days. And I've asked the question and said to him, so what are you going to do now? I've asked him the question, where were you supposed to be today on the third day? And they said, oh, we were supposed to be on another job. And I said, so what have you done with that? Oh, we've had to speak to the customer and say, I'm really sorry, but we'll come to you next day. And I said, so what does that do now? And some of them said, well, we'll have to just push all the customers back. And a couple of them actually said to me that, well, it just means I have to work on a weekend. Neither of their options are really good because not only for the customer, for themselves as well, because it pushes everything else back. And I think I am interested to hear Thom's view on that in terms of, how do you allocate time to a job, and do you put some kind of buffer factor in as well at the same time?
I mean, it's a great point, Faisal, because there aren't many businesses that I know that can build in a buffer, because without being too sort of passe, time is money. What we have to do, if we go back to what we said about the processes, we understand how many teams we have. We understand on average what they can fit in a day. We understand when the product came in, when we're expecting to fit it, and we absolutely have a good idea of how long it should take. What you can't control are all the human factors, because sometimes you'll be pushed back because something happens at the customer's end. So the customer will ring and say, something's happened, I can't have you today. Or one of the teams may be ill and they don't turn up. But if you're in control of your systems and you're in control of your operations, although that's going to have a knock-on impact to your schedule, because we book our schedule based on all the available teams 4 or 5 days a week. And if something happens, there will be an impact in the schedule. But I think it's about how you manage that professionally. it's telling people in time. It's about understanding how it's going to impact on them. One of the first things that happens, and I'm sure you've heard this hundreds of times, Faisal, that contractually, time is not of the essence in our contract. So if it runs on, or if somebody's taken a day off work and then we have to cancel, the first thing people are going to say is, well, I've got to take a day off work. Are you going to compensate me for it? So there is impact in that process to everybody involved, whether it's the fitter, whether it's the company, whether it's the customer. Somebody will not be happy. And you have to understand that. You have to be grown up about it, and you have to manage it.
Definitely. And I think it's important as well around empowering your staff and how you, as a leader of your business, handle any mistakes or handle any challenging situations. And Thom, what advice would you give on those issues?
Transparency and honesty. It's one of the things. I mean, probably I know you know that Faisal and I have known each other for a long time. We've had a relationship with the business. We were a founding member at DGCOS. But over the period of time that we've installed product, we will end up with an unhappy customer. It happens. That's one of the reasons why we are such a supporter of DGCOS, because it takes the emotion out of it and it gives the customer an opportunity to talk to people independently. They haven't got to take my point of view. I can give my point of view to DGCOS. They can give their point of view, and somebody can mediate a resolution. But one of the things I would consistently say whenever I've spoken to one of Faisal's team members is, I can prove we're transparent. I will be able to prove that through the process, whether it was the sales process, the survey, the installation, or the aftercare, that we have always been transparent. I wouldn't tolerate any of our staff telling lies. We don't make things up. The van didn't break down. We are honest. Sometimes that's quite painful, if I'm honest. It would be easier to ring people up and make an excuse, but it's just not who we are. So that would be my advice to most people. Be honest and be transparent, because that way you can never get caught out.
Yeah. And I think as well, to recognise that mistakes are part of life and they are a learning opportunity, and that at some point somebody is going to make a mistake, and that's it's an opportunity to learn and to move forwards, and it's when and hopefully people don't keep making the same mistake. That's what we hope, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think particularly as it refers to what we discussed earlier about not being the smartest person in the room, how do you get your staff to have the confidence to make decisions? And I've only got one rule I insist on in that process is with just because it's easier, we give some people in the organisation in management positions authority levels if it's involving money. So up to a particular authority level, they can just make those decisions without referring to us as the owners of the business, because that just makes everything happen much more quickly. But when people are making decisions, and you've got to let them learn how to make decisions by making mistakes, the only thing I insist on is, can you explain to me how you arrived at the decision? The fact that I might have come to a completely different conclusion looking at the same set of circumstances isn't a point. That might be the benefit of my experience or knowledge, or just my view of how things operate. But as long as somebody can say, well, this is how I made that decision, I'm happy. I don't care that they made a mistake. I think they'll learn from it. But they've got to know why they made the decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having that process, that discussion, it fosters a culture within your business that values growth, and then learning from those errors will help with the resilience of the business and the staff within it going forwards. So that brings us on to our final discussion for today, around this. There's just a vowel in it. So it's the difference between working on your business and working in your business. So Faisal, I'll come to you first. What do you think is the difference between working on your business as opposed to working in your business?
Yeah, I think I'm smiling because many years ago, my mentor, Richard Christie, when I was working in the marketing department, and he gave me a very nice way of saying it. He said, it's working in your business, it's about you've got your head down and your arse up. And sorry, apologies if I'm not allowed to say that, but and I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, if you're working your head down, you're just looking at your desk and you're working away. And he said, what you need to be able to do, you need to step back and look around so you can see the bigger picture. And I went, all right, okay. And I never really fully understood it, is the honest answer when he first said it. But as you go along, if you are working all the time doing the day-to-day tasks in your business, then when is the time where you actually go, I'm going to take an hour just to think about my business. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to think about my business. Where do I want to go in my business? Where do I want to go individually? And I know a lot of people will listening in will say, I don't have time to think.
Yeah.
And that is the reality of the situation. You don't have time to think. So it's about, well, how can you give yourself some time? Don't start with an hour. Start with 5 minutes maybe to yourself, and work your way that way. So, and I think that's the way I see it. And listen, I struggle with it on a daily basis. I think we all do. But I think giving yourself a bit of time to work on your business by giving a bit of thinking time, focusing on where you want to go, will actually help you in the long run.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I can remember back from my marketing days as well. And I think this is really applicable. Is it your 5 W's and an H or something like that? But it's your who, what, why, when, and how. So four W's and an H. But even if you just think of those things while you're having a coffee to start your process off, who am I as a business, and who are my customers? Why am I in business? Why am I wanting to service them? And just think your who, what, why, when, and how. And even just starting to think at that level of basicness to start off with might get you started thinking, well, if that is my target customer, how am I attracting them? What am I going to do for them? When am I going to be communicating with them, taking a deposit from them, those sorts of things? Just something really as easy to remember and as simple as that, just to get you started.
I think I made a little note to sort of say on this topic. Working in your business just makes you self-employed. Working on your business needs a much more entrepreneurial attitude, because if you're so involved with everything you do that you don't have time to think, if you're saying to someone, I haven't got an hour in the day to think, then it's never going to change. You're not trusting the people in your team. You've not delegated responsibilities. You're always just going to be at the coalface. And we talked earlier in a different segment about the vocabulary and understanding it. And I'm going to apologise for using another acronym, but one of the things that's really important on your business is to carry out regular SWOT analysis. And SWOT really is just about understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. But it's like articulating anything. If you draw and let's just assume people don't understand it, so those of you that do, forgive me, but if you draw 2 lines in an axis and you put SWOT on those lines, and then under each of the letters list all your strengths, list your weaknesses, list your opportunities and any threats there are to your business. And a threat may be, for example, as we've just replaced our financial controller, succession planning is so important in a business. If you don't give any thought to what's going to happen to key personnel, how do you train people to take over from that one key surveyor you've got, or an installer with 30 years experience? If you don't actually spend time writing that on a bit of paper so you can step back and look at it and say, oh, actually, I've got lots of strengths, but I've actually got lots of opportunity. if you don't do that, all you do is, as Faisal eloquently put, you are just looking down, and you are not standing back and seeing any of the horizon at all, and that will lead, eventually it just leads to missing opportunity
and burnout. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And how important, Thom, is it, do you think, to find that balance, to invest time in that strategic planning, and so that you can impact your business's future success?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital, Anna, that all businesses, are on different journeys. People who might be listening to this podcast could have been in business for 20 years. It could be people that have been in business for 20 months. It could be somebody who's only just started. So they're all on different journeys. But basically, you can boil down what's required into some very simple truths. You've got to buy well, you've got to sell better, and you've got to be able to retain what you've made. So however big or small your business is, controlling your costs is vital. Being able to build a pipeline so you've always got more work coming is vital. And you can't do any of that if you've just spent all day with your head down quoting, for example, or you spent all day, on your shop floor. You just, all you can deal with is what's happening in that day, and it might be a really busy day. But what happens to tomorrow and what happens to next week? You can only do that if you step back.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. Well, thank you so much, Thom and Faisal. Thank you both for sharing your valuable insights today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we hope that it's equipped you with some strategies to help you optimize your operations and set your business on a path to success. And if you do want some help, please, at first instance, have a look in the show notes that accompany this episode. But I would say reach out, find your tribe, reach out to your scheme providers, to DGCOS, HICS and HIES, and ask them for help. See them as a part of your team. They are there and they would be ready to help and point you in the right direction. Look for mentors, go to industry events. You will find us at the National Home Improvement Council at Installer Show this year. But reach out, find people that can help you, that can support you, and can be part of your community to allow you to create success within your business. So a big thank you again to our sponsors for this podcast series, DGCOS, HICS and HIES, for making this series possible. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast for more invaluable advice and stories. You'll find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Google Podcasts, and also on YouTube. I'm Anna Scothern. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you here on the next episode.